Edward was a barred rock chick that I got a little over a year ago. He was curious and crazy, but he sure learned a lot and grew up to be a great rooster. He protected his flock like none other. So this channel is a nod to Edward. Edward, wherever you are, I hope that my curiosity could help me learn as much as you learned to be a great rooster.
I just don't get tired of that. Okay, I'm back. Sorry I had to leave so suddenly. Um, my husband went to an orientation and came home a little early, and he always comes first. So I just wanted to go ahead and move on to the next part that I had on my mind, which was about Danny and Wendy of The Shining. We kind of kicked the dead horse with Ullman because I made it very clear that in the book, there is a big difference in the feeling between Jack and Ullman in the interview. He didn't like Ullman one bit. The movie made it out like they were chummy. There is a big part of the maintenance guy showing Jack around, talking about the other maintenance things that Jack would be doing as an employee of the Outlook Hotel. Now, that comes into play later on. I just ate, so you'll have to excuse me if I look like I'm messing with my teeth. But it plays a big part later on because a lot of the things that Jack is expected to do per the book is repair the roof, exterminate any pests like rats in the basement, of course, work on the boiler. And Watson even advises Jack to a point that the Overlook manager, Ullman, is going to try to get every cent worth out of Jack's work. So if that includes, cleaning all the toilets or something, he would do that. So one of the things Jack says he doesn't mind doing is crawling up on the roof, making some roof repairs and, exterminating rats and making sure they don't overrun the hotel. Fine. So we move on. I'm going to share screen and show you a part in both the movie and then what I'm seeing in the video. Whew, there's a lot here. I'm just going to share the entire screen. So here we go. Look at this, the tunnel from hell. I'm all the way back there. I love that part. Anyways, so we're going to go over to the Shining job interview. Now, this is the part after Jack spoke to Ullman in the movie The Shining by Kubrick. You see Danny, it goes into Danny being in the bathroom, and he's talking to Tony. As if you've savvy on the movie, Tony is the entity that foretells stuff. And he's saying here, Tony is telling him that Jack is going to call Wendy and tell her the good news that they're going to the hotel. Now, if you elaborate this part in the book, here they're in Boulder, Colorado, and she looked out the kitchen window, which obviously in the movie, there's no window in front of Wendy. But instead of being in the bathroom, Danny is outside. And he is outside sitting on the curb waiting for Jack to return from the interview. And it's hours away and stuff like that. And so she starts going back down memory lane about the things that they've gone through in the past. Obviously, Jack's alcoholism, when he lost his temper. One thing that they do align between the movie and the book is that Jack at one point got angry at Danny for dropping papers on the floor, and he tried to grab him and broke his arm. There's this weird cumbersome part that Wendy explains that to a doctor that comes to their house. Now later, there is a difference about the doctor. Okay, first of all, when reading The Shining, Wendy goes through the thoughts of everything and how she feels about Jack, not just about Jack when he broke Danny's arm, and obviously there's resentment about that, but there's also the thoughts about when she first met Jack. And it talks about Wendy's background and how she had an abusive mother and how she couldn't get away from her mother. And because of Jack, she kind of found some independence and she loved him, and he kind of helped save her from that. And so here Danny's arm is in a cast. He does things he's sorry for later. She she is upset because she knows that Jack is kind of repents the stuff that he's done to Danny. She knows he loves Danny. This part of the book is really important because it sets up how much Jack really does love Wendy and Danny. I'm sorry, but in the movie, you don't feel that one bit. I'm going to go ahead and play through this part. But when I saw the movie, I was just thinking the whole time, like, why is this woman with this guy? He's such a dick. But in the book, it explains why. I mean, they've gone through a lot together. And I'm sorry, but in the movie, Wendy's got like this real cartoon character feel to her, like, hey, hon, well, that's swell. But in the book, it's not like that. I'm going to pause this real quick because if you see, Ullman is in the background here, and this is the character that plays Watson. Now, in the book, Watson's not in a suit. He's just some big burly guy in overalls that walks Jax around. He's the maintenance guy, right? In this book, in the movie, you hardly even notice the guy because he says maybe 2 words. But in the book, he's very prominent. In fact, he plays a key role in setting up Jack for everything. So here, Danny is talking to Tony in the bathroom. The difference between this part and the other part in the book, first of all, it talks about Danny and how perceptive Danny is about the whole situation between his mother and his father and the alcoholism. Danny is perceptive on how much mom and dad love each other. Danny is also perceptive about, after getting his arm broken, the resentment mom had for Jack, and that mom had actually debated on divorcing him. Now, here in the book, it goes back and forth. We're talking about Watson. And so as I prove my point here, you see Watson has quite the dialogue. I mean, look at all this stuff. He and Jack have this huge conversation, and so we go on to the next page, and Jack is kind of elaborating to Watson that he is a recovering alcoholic and all this stuff, and Watson doesn't seem to mind one bit. And so he goes on to talk about the boiler, right, and how important the boiler is. Okay, pressure gauge, pounds per square inch, blah, blah, blah. He goes on. And here we go. I got me a fucking cold. So he has, bad language. He's kind of your blue collar worker, right? So they look at this. I mean, and then he says, she creeps. That's important because later on in the book, the boiler creeping up into dangerous heights plays a role in the demise of the Outlook. So we go on, and he's referring to the boiler as, she and automatic shutdown, blah, blah, blah. They go on, right? And then he talks about the plumbing core and all this stuff, the pipes in the building. Look at all this. So, Ullman said the first winter caretaker killed his family and himself. And, then that's when, that guy Grady, that's when Watson elaborates on the story of Grady and what happened, blah, 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 blah. So while this is happening in the book, later on, Danny will end up having an episode in the bathroom where he goes to brush his teeth before bed. Here, he's just casually talking in the mirror with Tony. But in the book, he goes in the bathroom, shuts the door, and out of character, he locks the bathroom door. And when Wendy and Jack comes home and Wendy and Jack are waiting on him, they go to knock on the door and he's not answering. Jack ends up kicking the door in. They find Danny sitting on the edge of the tub, foaming at the mouth with a toothbrush in his hand, sitting on the edge of the tub, just zoned out. They wake him up. He snaps out of it. But I guess in the book, when he talks to Tony, he goes into a trance-like state. And apparently he tells his parents that Tony told him to lock the bathroom door. They're shaken up because they don't understand why he did that. Why would he lock the door? He'd never done that. So that's when Wendy decides, hey, before we go, now this is per the book, not the movie. Wendy decides before we go to the Outlook Hotel where we get cut off for the winter, why don't we go to the doctor, all three of us, and get a clean bill of health? And Jack agrees. He says, great idea. Let's do that. So let me spare you all the reading in here, and we'll kind of get to um, here. Danny said he understood a great many things about his parents. So he also is aware that many times they didn't like his understandings. This is why Danny's afraid to open up to Jack and Wendy about Tony. As far as mom and dad know, Tony's just an imaginary friend, right? So he knows about the emotional distaste of the divorce and things like that. And then there's Tony here talking to Danny. And in the book, per Danny, Tony is just described as this other kid that is just too far out of reach to see, but he sees him way out in the shadows, like down a street or something like that. And so in the book, before when he's in the bathroom, Tony is warning Danny about the hotel. He's telling him not to go, don't go. And then at the beginning here, he starts to elaborate red rum. So it's not something you see in the movie until way later on, after Jack has already kind of lost his mind. In the book, it comes early on before they even get to the Outlook. And all Tony can tell Danny is red rum, red rum. Here we go, red rum, red rum. And Danny doesn't like it. Danny starts to get a little afraid of Tony at this point in the book. So it's kind of to the point where Tony used to be his friend. And because the Outlook is coming, Tony is becoming something that Danny doesn't like to talk to, because all the things that Tony is saying is scaring Danny, telling Danny, giving him images of his daddy hurting mommy and things like that. So before I close about Danny and Wendy, I'll touch back up on Ullman one more time and the friend that helped Jack get the job. Now, the only reason I'm touching on this because without it's not in the movie at all. In fact, you don't see anything about the friend helping Jack. But in the book, they elaborate on a huge section of the relationship Jack has with a coworker at the school, the high school that he worked at. His friend was an alcoholic with him, and they both used to go out drinking together all the time. There we go. Recording just got better. That's nice. So we'll go back to the book. So in the book, this friend of Jack Torrance, they would go out, they're drinking buddies, and they would go out and get drunk together. And at one night, I guess the friend was driving. The friend's name is Al. And Al hit something, what they think was somebody on a bicycle, but they didn't see a person. They just saw the bike in the road, and it scared the hell out of them. After that, they both decided to quit drinking. Besides that, Jack had the episode where he, broke Danny's arm. So everything just needed to stay in the past. So they have these phone calls with each other, Jack and his friend Al, where they would say something like, "How you been?" And the other one will say dry as a bone, or dry. And the other one would say as a bone. So it's kind of like they're supporting each other. Jack gets the notion, because he was so pissed off at Ullman about the interview and how Ullman was rude to him, that he was going to smear the Outlook. Now, he gets this idea because as he's doing his chores at the Outlook, he goes into the basement, and there's this whole idea, this whole part in the book about all the things that Jack finds in the basement. They don't even show it in the movie. Jack finds stacks and stacks of old papers, invoices, bookkeeping boxes, all kinds of stuff, records. But he also finds a photo album. And in the photo album, there's a bunch of conspicuous clippings about the Outlook and the murders that have happened there, and how the mob was involved, and how it was a whorehouse for high-end people. and rich people would come there and do weird, kinky things and almost on a cult level. And it was swept under the rug out in the Outlook because that was the place where you could go, almost like the Vegas of their time. And Jack finds this out, and he can't wait to call Ullman now by then, Ullman and everyone has left the hotel. Ullman's in Florida or something like that, and he's working at another hotel down south. Jack makes a point to come down into the town. This is before the snowfall, and call from a phone booth, as you can see here. And he tells Danny to stay in the car, and he calls this guy Ullman and starts basically right here. He had lost his temper. So he basically calls this guy Ullman and starts rubbing it in about how imperfect the Outlook Hotel is, and basically pisses the guy off. Now, there's another part to this whole story, is how he ended up working at the Outlook in humility, because when he was sober and still working at the high school, he still had a temper problem. So it's not like everything got better after he quit drinking, because it actually got worse. He was apparently head of a debate class, and in the class was some rich guy's son named George Hatfield. I'm sure you saw the name pop up as I was scrolling here. I just remembered it right here as I saw it. So George Hatfield was a teenager, a high schooler that was in the debate club. And it even said that he did very well in debate, except when he got nervous or when he got down to the wire, he started to stutter. So because of that, Jack had to cut him from the debate team, and George got mad. So to get back at Jack Torrance, Jack caught him one day slashing his tires. And because of that, Jack Torrance ended up beating up a high school kid in the parking lot, and everybody saw it. So that's how he lost his job as a high school teacher, and ended up basically ended up needing a job for something else, at the Outlook Hotel. Now, I don't remember what part it is, but I think it's somewhere in the job interview or first scene or something like that. I want to say it was the first scene, but you'll see Jack Torrance wearing a sweater with the high school name on it. So once we get past these Advil commercials, you could probably see it. But that's a lot of the parts that I noticed the big difference of between Danny, Wendy, how Jack got with Watson, and basically that section that I wanted to cover. So I'm going to leave it at that, because I could delve into hours and hours more. So the next part that I will cover in the next video is going to be Danny's conversation with Halloran. Halloran is the other man that has the Shining, and their meeting is essentially the same, but it is a little bit different here and there. So Shining read online. Daddy hesitated. Danny starts talking about the dream. Oh, and I've got to talk to you about appointment. So next video, we'll talk more about the doctor's interaction and Mr. Halloran. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, because, we shouldn't share. But that's kind of a cool tidbit of information to know about The Shining. So thanks for joining me on this 20-minute venture. I think it's movie time with the husband, and we'll research some more. And like I said before, if there's another book or movie that you want me to compare, hey, bring it up to my attention, and I'm happy to share it. All right, guys. Learn as much as you can. Take care.